Hi everyone, welcome back to Earl Grey Books. I'm Ellie and I'm here today to rank my Eurovisionathon reads. So this video is a little bit late. It's been like almost a month since Eurovisionathon ended. I did mean to have this up earlier, but then I got sick and I couldn't film. So here it is now, and we're going to talk through the books. I read 11 during the readathon, and we're going to rank them from worst to best. So we're going to jump straight into it. Like I said, we're going to start with the worst one, so number 11. I got my stack here, and let's get into it. You will have seen most of these in my vlogs, but unfortunately my vlog for week 4, the file got corrupted and I had to delete it off YouTube because it only uploaded the first 4 minutes. So unfortunately you didn't get to see me talk about a couple of these books. I'm really sad because I had some really good reads in that vlog, but I'm going to talk to you about them now. So let's jump into it. So in spot number 11 was The Willoughbys by Lois Lowry. This was the second book that I read during the readathon, and it was my book for Switzerland, and I absolutely hated it. I thought it was terrible. This is I don't even know if I'd say this is middle grade. I'd say this is more like junior fiction. It's sort of like a chapter book kind of thing, and it follows these 4 children, the Willoughbys, who have these awful parents who hate them. They kind of hate their parents, and yeah, their parents do all these things trying to get rid of them and all this kind of stuff, and that's literally what it is. And it sounds really cute, and I thought it would be a lot of fun, and it feels very, it draws a lot from like 19th century children's literature, and it feels a little bit like a series of unfortunate events, kind of if they mixed those two but then wrote it really badly. And yeah, I hated it. This is my second Lois Lowry book, and I hated both of them. So at least I know I won't be reading anything else of hers. Probably ever. And then number 10 was actually my first book that I read, and that was The Beautiful Summer by Cesar Pavese. I did enjoy this one, but it was just kind of meh. Like, I really liked some parts of it, but I also felt very unimpressed by other parts. I kind of expected this to be, I don't know, more meaningful, I guess. And as well, I think this is partly the fault of the translator, in that some of the things that were, obviously this is, I should have said this was for Italy. Some of the things that were said were very clearly British slang and things like that. I think at one character, at one point, I can't remember the exact word, but was like, I think was like an old bugger or something like that. And I'm like, that's exactly the kind of things that like my grandfather, who was born in Britain in 1926, would have said, and not some 16-year-old living in Italy. Granted, it's set in 1930, I think. Yeah, 1930s. But like, I doubt a 16-year-old woman in 1930 Italy is going to be calling someone an old bugger or whatever it was. So I think moments like that really drew me out of the story. And I know it's such a weird thing to care about, but I think if it was like set in modern day, it wouldn't be such a big deal, but because it's historical, it just felt very out of place, and it really drew me out of the story. That being said, I am definitely going to try some more of this author's books. You may have seen me do a video probably about a month ago now, in which I said I was starting this project about reading different countries in the world, and Italy is one of the countries I have selected for a few months' time, so I will be definitely trying to read some more of his books during that. But yeah, this one, it was okay. The next one was The Mad Women's Ball by Victoria Mars. This was my book for France. This is set in, I think it's 1885 in Paris, in this asylum, and the title pretty much suggests what it is. The women of the asylum hold a ball. Here's the thing. There is very little actually about the ball. There's a lot that happens, and it's very intense, and I didn't love it, obviously, because it's this far down on the list, but it's complicated. I still don't really know how I feel about this one. I know that this is the spot on the list where it belongs, but I don't really know why that is. And as well, it is inherently ableist, because these are women who are experiencing mental health issues, or sometimes just other health issues, and they're literally locked up in an asylum. And I still can't really decide if the whole idea of crazy was kind of dealt with well or not. So yeah, it's also hard because I did read these like at least a month ago, so some of the details are a bit foggy, but yes, that's that one. And I would say from this point, I did enjoy all of these books, like a really good amount. It was really hard in this middle section to sort of work out which books went where, but the next one I picked was A Curse of Roses by Diana Pinchueca. This was one of the ones that I think got completely lost in that fourth vlog. I don't think I mentioned it all in the third one, and I did read it in that final week. This was my book for Portugal. So this is historical fiction. It follows Isabel, who is a princess, and she is due to become the Queen of Portugal. And she is a real historical figure. She does indeed become the Queen of Portugal. But this is about her sort of as a teenager, and she has this curse where whenever she touches food, it turns into flowers. And at the time, Portugal is having a lot of trouble with grains and things like that. There is a food shortage. There is lots of illness going around. Lots of people are dying. And Isabel just wants to help. She wants to help in any way that she possibly can, and feels terrible that she wastes all this food because she can't eat it, because the second she touches it, boom, flowers. This is also a sapphic romance, so it is YA, but there is so it's not like romance. Do you get what I mean? This was very intense. I would definitely not recommend this to a lot of people, which sounds bad, but there is a lot of religious-based self-harm. There is a lot about like eating disorders in a way, like it's magical, but it's eating disorders. It's lots of triggering, intense emotional stuff. That side was, while it was intense and emotional, I did enjoy it. There were some things that were just a little bit too much, but I did still really like it. I was less fussed on other things. I like Isabella. She seems pretty interesting, and I've read up a little bit on the real person sense, but I didn't like pretty much any of the other characters like at all. And yes, don't really know what else I have to say about that one. And then the next one, I think this one was again lost in that video, but I did read Devotion by Hannah Kent. This was my book for Germany, but it also, if I'd chosen, could have been my book for Australia. This is half set in Prussia in 1836, and it's also set partly in South Australia, and Hannah Kent is Australian. So, but I went with Germany, and I was kind of sticking with the historical lesbian theme with this one. This follows Han, who is a young girl living in this religious-based community in Prussia in 1836, and they're about to embark on this journey to South Australia. So it sort of takes place really in 3 places: in Germany, on the ship as they're going across, and then in South Australia once they arrive. So I loved the part that was in Germany. It was fantastic. Hannah Kent has a extremely beautiful way of writing. Her books are always very atmospheric. You very much feel as if you are there, and that is fantastic. And I've seen her speak a couple of times, and she does a ridiculous amount of research for her first book, Burial Rites, which is set in Iceland and is one of my favorite books of all time. She literally learnt Icelandic. Anyway, I have a huge literary crush on Hannah Kent, but this one loved that first bit. And then about maybe halfway through or so, it takes this really strange turn, and it just, I'm not going to spoil it, but it just goes in a completely different direction than what I was expecting. And then I didn't really like that direction, but I was so invested that I didn't want to stop reading it. But it was definitely strange, and I'm still kind of confused about it now. I think it took me a good 50 or 60 pages after this thing happened to be convinced that that was what had actually happened and that I hadn't just read it wrong. I did still really like it, but it was definitely a weird kind of oh, okay, this is where we're going. So there we are. Next we have The Little Book of Luca, which was my book for Denmark. I have owned this one for a number of years. It was a gift from one of my best friends, Inga, and I just hadn't read it. So this is the same author as The Little Book of Huga, which I love and is adorable. This one was a little less relevant to me, in that it talks a lot about family and kids, and I do not have kids, so those things I just skipped over because it's not relevant at all to my life. I have no kids in my life. I don't have any cousins or nieces or nephews or anything like that. And it was still interesting. I actually really enjoyed some of the stats in here that was looking at different ratings of happiness in different countries, and Australia isn't that high up considering. Yes, it was fun, but it was not as comforting and that sort of thing as The Little Book of Hugo. Next, we actually move on to the two ebooks that I read during the readathon. The first being Shadows on the Tundra by Dalia Grinkowitz. This was my book for Lithuania. I'd forgotten for a second there. This is the true story of the author, who was among the Lithuanians who were basically exiled to remote Siberia by the Russians during World War II. And they're basically they're essentially death work camps. And obviously it's Siberia, so it's extremely cold, and this was a very important book, but it was also horrific. The author goes into a lot of detail about different medical things that people that she was with experienced. A lot of people lose fingers and toes to frostbite, and there's a plethora of illness going around in the camp. And that stuff was not nice to read about at all. If you are at all kind of sensitive to descriptions of things like that, I would not give this a read, but it was really interesting. I think as well, one of my favorite things about it was that you could really feel the sense of like the coldness. Like it really felt like it came through the page, and like you were, that sort of feeling like you were there and you were that cold, and you were kind of like you felt like you needed to like rug up almost. So that was really interesting. And then the other one was Soviet Milk by Nora Ikstena. This was my book for Latvia. The author is Latvian and it was translated, and this is just a little short novella about two women, a mother and her daughter, living in Soviet era Latvia and the experiences that they go through. This was weird. It's very strange, but I also kind of loved it. Like, it was really interesting and beautifully written, and it's a very complicated relationship that these two women have with each other, but I really enjoyed that. So next up we're into the top 3 now. So number 3 was The Good Hawk by Joseph Elliott, which was my book for Norway. This one kind of feels like it's cheating a little because this was a reread for me and I already loved it the first time, but I couldn't bring myself to put it any lower on the list. So here it is. This is the story of Agatha and Jamie, who are Scottish. So they are kind of forced to go on this journey through what is basically like medieval ancient fantasy Scotland, and there's also a connection to Norway. And like I said, this was a reread for me so that I can continue on with this series. But I really liked being back in this world and I had a lot of fun reading it. Okay, number 2 was Pandoras Jar by Natalie Haynes, which was my book for Greece. This is a book that looks at women in Greek myths and so it takes women that are mentioned in Greek myths like Persephone and, let me try and think who else, Medusa, Helen, Medea, people like that, and it looks at them in the Greek myths, but then it looks at them how the ancient Greek world looked at these women and in comparison to how we look at them now, including going through some different places that they pop up in literature and in other forms of media. And I thought it was really fascinating, and it was also kind of witty and it was fun, and I wasn't really expecting that, but I absolutely loved it. And I would highly recommend this to anyone who is looking for books about Greek myths from a little bit of a different perspective. And then finally, book number 1 was The Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels by India Holton, which was my book for the UK. This is a historical romance. It was going to win immediately. It was so much fun. This is a book that does not take itself seriously at all, but I loved every second of it. It was so much fun. What I love about this one as well is that it has a very literary connection to it. It talks a lot about the Bronte sisters, who, I mean, I love. Yeah, I mean, I was going to say who doesn't, but a lot of people don't. But anyway, I loved that sort of literary reference in there, and there are references to all sorts of things, and it's just so much fun. So it kind of is like, take like a historical romance. I think in my written review of this I mentioned Bridgerton's, just because it's one that a lot of people are aware of right now. It's kind of like that in Victorian times, plus Howl's Moving Castle. So there are these houses, and the women are like pirates, but the houses like move around, so the houses are like their ships instead of like an actual ship. It's just so much fun. I really, really enjoyed it. Absolutely loved it, and it was just brilliant and exactly what I needed. A lot of these books were quite intense, as I've mentioned, and emotional, and it was just so nice to have one that was fun and light and enjoyable. And I have book 2 waiting for me just here when I have time to read it soon. So those are all the ones that I have. I did talk about this in that vlog. I can't remember if I talked about it at an earlier stage, but I was planning on doing a video, perhaps again as a vlog, of me reading some of the books that I didn't get to from my original TBR. I have a few here that I started and didn't get to finish, and a few more waiting for me on my shelves that I also didn't finish, and a couple on my Kindle that again I also didn't finish. So please let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. Let me know what your favorite book for Eurovisionathon was, if you participated or if you've read any of these. Would love to hear it. Hope you're all doing super well, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.